Over the years, we've often spoken about the structure of the Haggadah, so this time I'd like to do something else. Can we begin with Hallel? Mm-hmm. As many of you know, I like to begin sessions with a melody, with a song. And this is the first nigun I ever wrote. I was 18 years old, and my father had just returned from Poland, and he spoke about...
Why did he go to Poland?
He was one of the first to...
What year are we talking about?
1959.
So
my father went to Poland.
And for what purpose was he going to Poland?
My father lost 3 siblings and their families, and deep down, I think, he returned on a voyage, one of the first to go back, and I think he was looking for them deep down. And my father, of blessed memory, became an expert in Polish Jewry and wrote a very classic book that I think tens of thousands of copies are out there, and it's called From Oświęcim to Auschwitz. I know that when we went to protest at Auschwitz against the convent, and the locals were giving us serious problems. So when we said we've come to Auschwitz, they shouted at us, "That's not what this is. This is Oświęcim." They were unwilling to really say that they had any responsibility in what had occurred in Auschwitz. In general, in our travels, I found that the Poles and the Austrians didn't face up to their past, because they always claimed that the Germans were the ones who forced them, or they were the ones responsible. But in our travels in Germany, I felt that the Germans, more than the others, they fessed up to what had occurred. So when my father came back, 1959, 1960, by then I was 16, 17, and he always spoke about standing over the remnants in Auschwitz, and he quoted the sentence from the Book of Lamentations, Al Eile Ani Bochia, I cry about the following. And then he quoted Ezekiel, will these bones live? So this is a nigun that goes back more than 60 years. And we'll begin with this nigun because in this session, I'd like to talk about blood. I'd like to talk about the ritual of when we dip our fingers, when we dip a finger into the blood, and we do it several times. And it's within the framework of will these bones live on? So sit back just for 2 or 3 minutes. Remember that the music is not as advanced as it is in today's age, but I'm very grateful to the Noam singers who had it on their album. encourage you, those who don't have the Haggadah, please feel welcome to come and pick it up because of Tova. So the Haggadah is available for anyone who wishes to have a copy. It's our great pleasure. In the Haggadah, it's structured in such a way that before the meal, we have a storytelling portion. And after the storytelling, and stories are a beautiful way of transmitting ideas, there is a learning, a deep learning, where we lift 4 sentences from the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, which summarizes the story. And for each phrase, we study those phrases. And then there are other sections, but I want to stay laser focused on what we're doing. Every aspect of the Haggadah probably deserves attention and far better commentary than the humble commentary that I offered. But there is that point in the Haggadah where we start listing the plagues, dam, tzvardeya, and normatively we put our pinky or one of our fingers into the wine and we spill the red wine as our way of saying that even in victory there's sadness that we shed the blood of the enemy. It's the Golden Meir line that perhaps one day she said, I'll be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our boys. She's much better than I am. I don't think I could do that. But I'll never be able to forgive them for forcing our sons and daughters in protecting the state of Israel to take the life of others. Now, actually, the very listing of the Makot, the structure of the Haggadah, as I intimated just a moment ago, is very complicated. The plagues are actually found, they're found in a commentary on the last word of the 4 sentences that we use as a text of study from Parshat Kitavo, from Deuteronomy, where we say about the Exodus, Vayotzienu Adonai Misham, God took us out from there. Biyad chazaka, uvizroa netuya, uvishvatim gidolim, uvaotot, uvamoftim. And the commentary on that is that each of those 5 phrases represent 2 of the makot. And then we list the makot, dam, tzvardeya, kinim. And that's really where its placement appears. It appears on the word umoftim. But what is not well known, that interpretation is a second interpretation. There is a first interpretation of all of those words that have nothing to do with the plagues. That is to say, there is an interpretation on the words, Vayotzienu Hashem Misham biyad chazaka. And Yad Chazaka in the first Perush has nothing to do with the plagues. Neither does Uvizroa Netuya, and neither the last words, Uvimoftim. So what I'd like to focus on is the first interpretation of Uvimoftim. What is the first interpretation of Uvimoftim? So if we take a look at it, for those who may have the Haggadah, and if you don't, it's just as well. We'll try to explain it. Here in this Haggadah, in Tova's Haggadah, it's on page 76. Uvimoftim ze hadam, kema shenema v'natati moftim b'shamayim uva'aretz. This is the blood. Now blood is being mentioned. And then we say, dam, va'esh, v'timrot ashan. Now, what does dam mean? Dam means blood. Esh means fire. Timrot ashan really means a column of smoke, a column of smoke, a pillar of smoke, like the tamar. The tamar is like a palm tree, which is very beautiful, it's very slick, and it's like a pillar, the timrot ashan. Now, when you look at that, that's not talking about the plagues. We try to argue here that in this first interpretation of these words, the Haggadah is offering ideas that have nothing to do with the plagues. When we're dipping the blood, this is not dam, tzvardeya, blood, frogs, lice which infests everything. That's not what it is. It's dam va'esh v'timrot ashan. Now, it's very important, I believe, that when we study ritual or we study liturgy, to recognize that it's elastic. That is to say, that it speaks to all ages. And it is okay, perfectly okay, for all of us to think about what we've experienced in our personal lives, to think about events of the day, events of contemporary times, even events of the last 100 years, and to see whether in some way it's applicable to the words of liturgy or to the ritual. The words of liturgy here are blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. The ritual is the actual action of dipping our finger into the wine. And it's okay to be creative. I know there's a custom of people quoting this rabbi and that rabbi. There are many who are on this Zoom who are my rabbis. Estelle is my rabbi. Ellen is my rabbi. They're my rabbis. We all have something to offer. So in thinking about Dam va'esh v'timrot ashan and moving off the Egyptian experience, it's saying that Egypt is much more. It's an experience that repeats itself. After all, the word Mitzrayim comes from the word Sarah. Min ha'metzah karatika. That was a time of distress, but there are other times of distress in our personal lives, or other times of distress as we're experiencing these very days in a very dark, dark way. And in thinking about it, maybe one could suggest that this is the imagery of the Shoah. Let's think about this. During the Shoah, blood was being spilled. And it was not uncommon, certainly. Let's think about Auschwitz for a moment. How were we killed? We were first gassed to death. And after we were gassed, bodies were then incinerated. Esh, fire. How was the blood spilled? Fire. And the survivors talk about how they would look at the place of incineration and they would see smoke coming out of the smokestacks. Now, of course, my dear friend Rabbi Yitz Greenberg says that there was a time when the Nazis ran out of gas and so they just burnt us alive, literally. We weren't first gassed, and Jews suffered that kind of horrible, painful murder. And he actually calculated, it should be well, the cost of gas to gas a human being to death. It was like a fraction of a penny. We weren't even worth that in death. Could it be that when we say Dam va'esh v'timrot ashan, that's the imagery of the Shoah. But one more step, there's a flip side of that. I'm wearing now the diskits The diskit is the Hebrew way of saying, sometimes the American Army translation is dog tags. Every soldier wears an army tag. I don't like the expression dog tag. An army tag. I wear, this is not a hostage emblem that we all wore. Hostages, thank God, are free. These are the actual army tags that our grandsons, who are now in Gaza, up north, and where have you, that they wore. I took it from them. And when they said, you know, we lose our independence when we're in the army, and when I come back without an army tag, the commander's going to be very upset. And I said to them, well, you tell your commander that your Saba took it from you, I have to wear it, and I never leave it off my body. Last week, this is my family, so I tell them everything. I went through a colonoscopy. Not the sweetest thing to go through to prepare for. So I'm on the gurney, I'm ready for the colonoscopy. And the doctor was a doctor who I knew very, very well. He had been to the shul many times, so he's seen me in the raw. And the nurses look at my body, men and women, and the only thing I have on are these dog. She says, you gotta take off these tags. I said, I never take it off. And I looked at the doctor and I said, he said, if the rabbi wants to wear them, he can wear them. And when I see my grandchildren, when I see Gavi, who's in Charuv, I always, when I see him, I salute. I go 9288666, check. Or when I see Amichai is 9630892. Not bad for an 82-year-old guy almost. Or Gilad, he's like our professional. He's 33. He's always being called up. He's the real deal. He's my military advisor. He tells me what's going on. So he's 5822157. We can go on and on and on. And Eitan is 7666421. You know what my Ilana, my daughter, would say? If I would go through this, she'd say, Abba, get a life. Get a life. But when you think about that, there's been a lot of blood that has been spilled in Tzahal. It's the imagery of the army defending. It's defending the Jewish people. A lot of fire. We see the videos, fire. A lot of smoke. Dam va'esh v'timrot ashan. It's like the flip side. This is the imagery of the Shoah. But the moftim, the nurses, that in contemporary times we've experienced a response to the Shoah. It is not, God forbid, that the establishment of the state is worth 6 million lives. Nothing is worth 6 million lives and the millions more that were murdered. But had there been a state of Israel with an army, there never would have been a Shoah. Never. That's the miracle. The miracle is that this is the imagery of the Shoah, blood, where human beings literally were gassed, and then they were burnt, and the stacks of smoke. And it's the imagery of the state of Israel, of never again, of Jewish defense forces, of standing strong. And so we write here, Uvimoftim, and with wonders. Even as God steps in, it is only a matter of time until savage enemies attempt to attack, destroy, and annihilate the Jewish people. That first sentence is a sentence which we've not discussed. I'm trying to place it in its proper context. But from this point on, it's just the writing of what I've shared. For me, the imagery of the Haggadah, with its support text, explicating wonders as blood and fire and a pillar of smoke, may evoke remembrances of the Holocaust, when our blood was spilled as our lives were taken in gas chambers, leading to our being cast into the oven fire with its accompanying smoke. Just a few years after the Shoah, a wondrous intervention. With God's help, the state of Israel is born. Here, God no longer acts unilaterally. This too is something we've not discussed. This is also a review of something said beforehand, so I'll just read it through quickly. Having matured as a people, we are expected to partner with God to realize the dream of the Jewish state. Now, from this point on, we should get it. The blood, fire, smoke may represent in a dramatically different way the battles Israel fought and continues to fight to defend itself. Now let's look at the next paragraph. From this perspective, the spilling of wine from the Seder cup, as we call out blood and fire and pillar of smoke, may symbolize for our generation the spilling of Jewish blood when we were victimized during the Shoah, and the spilling of blood over the years as thousands of soldiers and victims of terror gave and lost their lives for Israel. Normatively, when we come across the first time we're spilling wine, dam va'esh v'timrot ashan, it's sort of part of a whole larger picture of the Makot. What we're suggesting is that looking at it from a scholarly perspective, the Makot are not being discussed here. Dam va'esh v'timrot ashan. What is that? Well, we're saying, and it's okay for individuals to offer what they personally are seeing within the text. This is the imagery of the Shoah. And this is the imagery of the response. You know, on October 7th, there were those who argued, obviously, the state of Israel, the miracle of the state of Israel, the experiment of the state of Israel failed. We failed because the state of Israel was always supposed to be that state which would be the Jewish insurance policy. Clearly, it's not our insurance policy because 1,200 was so brutally murdered. I argue the reverse. October 7th, with all of its horror, really shows that the experiment worked. There were many other times in history during 2,000 years of exile where something like that occurred. The Chmielnicki, the Crusades, the Chmielnicki pogroms. But we had no means to respond. Now, this time where there's a state of Israel, where there's an army of Israel, we had the wherewithal, with God's help, to respond. Dam va'esh v'timrot ashan. Dam va'esh v'timrot ashan. And here I do quote my father on page 77. If I can ask Shuli to read so I could save my voice. Hear my thoughts.
I'm just sharing it on the screen.
Thank you. Page 77.
Hopefully they can hear me.
Why don't you come here?
I got it. Here my thoughts are with my father of blessed memory, who was raised in the town of Oswiecim, which ultimately became the notorious Auschwitz death camp. In 1959, he was one of the first to return to Poland to visit the remnants of the Jewish communities that remained after the Shoah. Overcome by what he saw there and seeking a measure of comfort and healing, he flew to Israel for the first time. While in Israel, he composed a beautiful poem that speaks of the interfacing of the Holocaust and the reborn state of Israel. In his poem, my father pictures himself standing on a hill in the Auschwitz death camp overlooking the barracks, surrounded by white snow, ash, and bone. Recalling the question of the prophet Ezekiel, my father also asks, can these bones live? As if in a vision, there is a great noise and shaking. Bones come together with bones, covered by sinew and flesh and skin. Breath enters them and they live. They stand up on their feet, come out of their graves, and are brought to the land of Israel. The scene then shifts from darkness to light, death to life. My father now finds himself standing on a mountaintop in Jerusalem. Below, the vast host of the Jewish people is spread out in schoolrooms, cities, factories, villages, in peace and yes, also in battle. My father concludes his poem with this prayer: God, remember the souls of the departed and guard over the resurrected children of Israel in the land of Israel.
Now, were we to continue in this commentary, the 4-sentence commentary, the section of the Haggadah of learning, and we've commented on Uvimov, the last word of the 4 sentences, the way we've done so, the text then continues, Davar Acher, which means another explanation. And it's here that we list the plagues. In that first interpretation, the plagues are not mentioned because it really deals with events that are outside of Egypt of thousands of years ago. Now, the second interpretation talks about what happened in Egypt, Davar Acher, and it's going to offer a commentary on all of these phrases in that 4th sentence, Biyod Chazakah Shtayim, with a mighty hand. Those are 2 of the plagues, and the last will be Uvimoftim, and with wonder Shtayim are the last 2 plagues of Choshech and Makat Bechorot. And then the Haggadah says, in this new other interpretation, Elu esem makot shevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu al HaMitzrim b'Mitzrayim. These are the 10 plagues. Dam, Tzvadeya, and we list all 10 plagues. Arbe, Choshech, Makat Bechorot. Now, what I'd like to share at this point is yet another way of looking at the ritual of spilling blood. Because the truth of the matter is, these are pretty tough makot. Blood? Everything turns into blood. I know that the kids, when our kids were younger, they used to sing about one day when Pharaoh awoke in his bed, there were frogs on his head and frogs on his nose and frogs on his toes. Frogs here. That's pretty tough, frogs everywhere. And lice infested everywhere, and pestilence and boils and all of that. Locust, Gewalt. That was a hara. And Makat Bechorot. Egyptians were mamish murdered. I'd like to take it from a very different perspective from the way we normatively do, and that is that we're spilling blood to say that our heart is broken because we were forced in victory to take the blood of the enemy. And I'd like to take it from the perspective, from the question of what right does a human being, is there any justification for capital punishment? Is capital punishment mentioned in the Torah? Well, the first time capital punishment is mentioned in the Torah it is one of the 7 laws of Noah. One of the 7 laws is thou shalt not murder. Now, the sentence there reads, it's chapter 9, sentence 7, Shofech dam ha'adam, ba'adam damo yishafech. If someone spills the blood of another human being, by human beings will the murderer's blood be shed.
Do you want to see it?
You could see it, chapter 9, sentence 7. Thank you, Shuli. Shofech dam ha'adam. 1, 2, 3. And then it's going to be 3, 2, 1. Ba'dam, damo, yishafech. It has to be precise. Capital punishment only for those who are really guilty. As a matter of fact, by the time the Talmud finishes with capital punishment, it declares that for some rabbis, if there was one capital punishment in 70 years, that court is a murderous court. And some rabbis say if they would have been the head of the Sanhedrin, there would never be capital punishment. But in the Torah, there's capital punishment. When one takes the life of another, is there anything more horrific? But by what right do human beings have to take the life even of a murderer? Well, the Torah offers the reason. Shofech dam adam badam damo yishafech. Why? Ki b'tselem Elokim barat adam. Because the human being was born in the image of God. And what is it that makes a human being above other humans? Now, you can say many things. The ability to speak, the human psyche. In the Torah, what makes human beings unique above the animal world and in our theology, it's that every human being is created in the image of God. But some of the commentators say, if I have taken the life of another, then I've lost my right to life because I'm no longer human. I've lost my image of God. Now that's a very harsh, non-progressive commentary, but it's there. There is capital punishment in the Torah. Ki b'tselem Elokim barauto. Now, I don't want to get anyone too confused. There are many ways of understanding that last phrase. To whom does ki b'tselem Elokim refer to? Some say it refers to the murdered. You took that person's tselem Elokim. That's why there's capital punishment. Some say it refers to those who are carrying out the penalty. The judges are created b'tselem Elokim, and therefore they have the right in a God, as a little bit of God, to take life. But today we're focusing on the interpretation that the murderers, they've lost their right to life. They've lost the Tselem Elokim. And when I think about October 7th, not only murdering, but the way our brothers and sisters were murdered and decapitated and humiliated and raped. That's not normal. That's abnormal. That's not even animal. Even animals don't murder that way. And what I'm trying to argue is that at that point, those who committed that crime, those kinds of crimes, they've lost their right to life. I have no problem saying that. And when we spill the blood, dam tzvardeya, I want to turn it around. It doesn't refer to our feeling the pain of being forced to take the blood of the enemy. No, do you know what it is? It's the enemy's blood. And what we're saying is the enemy has forfeited their blood. They no longer have a right to life. I'm not talking about those who were not involved in that hara, but those who were directly involved in that hara. That's what the dam tzvardeya is. It's a very, very different approach. And it's a very provocative approach. And I'd like to take this, look at page 82. You can see it under gray. Here's what I write. The most commonly offered reason for spilling wine when listing the 10 plagues and their mnemonic relates
Want me to read it?
relates to wine, especially red wine, being a symbol of blood. When recalling the punishment meted out to the Egyptians, wine is spilled as a reminder that the loss of any life, even enemy life, is not to be celebrated. This is the normative approach. More expansively, perhaps it refers to the distress, even in self-defense, of killing our enemy. As Golda Meir once said, we cannot forgive them, the Arabs, for forcing us to kill their children. After October 7th, this is what we're adding. The spilling of wine may also symbolize our disgust for the barbaric Hamas murderers, rapists, and decapitators for losing their image of God, every shred of their humanity, if you will, losing and spilling their own blood. I write here, see Radak, Genesis. It's Radak's interpretation on capital punishment, that the murderer could be put to death because the murderer has lost the Tzelem Elokim. As pointed out, the first spilling of wine when reciting blood and fire and a pillar of smoke may refer to the spilling of Jewish blood. That's the Holocaust imagery. That's the imagery of Jewish soldiers losing their life. Now, the second time when we're spilling blood, I'm arguing the spilling of the blood refers to the enemy. Now there's a tripod, there's one more step. Because there's a third time that we spill the wine. And that is when the Haggadah continues, and in the Haggadah we say, Rabbi Yehuda haya noten bahem simonim. Rabbi Yehuda would offer a mnemonic. He takes the first 3 plagues of Ditzach, which is the mnemonic of Dam Tzvadei Akinim. That's what it spells out. It's the top of page 82, the top line. And then Adash, that's the mnemonic of Orov Dever Shchin. And then Bachav, Borod, Arba, Choshech, and then Makat Bechorot. He would put them all together. So some would argue, why did he do that? Because it's a sweet mnemonic. There's got to be something deeper. Now try to open up your hearts to this. We have just listed the plagues, and we have just listed the plagues as being a very tough, strong response to our enemies. Just anecdotally, when I look at our grandchildren in Israel, the whole psyche there is different than in America, the American teenagers. American teenagers, when Americans get to college, there's going to be anti-Semitism. With all of the bravery of many of those on college campus of testifying in Congress and raising a voice, there's a lot of fear. If we're pushed, what do most American teenagers do, Jewish teenagers do? Most of them run. You try to attack one of our grandsons or granddaughters in Israel. You know, they may be hurt they're not running. They are standing strong. If you're coming after me, I'm coming after you. I'm not going to take that. And frankly, I identify with that. The way you deal with an anti-Semite is you don't run. The more you run from anti-Semitism, the more the anti-Semite is going to feel stronger and will try to overwhelm us. What we have to do is to stand strong. The stronger we stand, the more protected we are, not the weaker we are. I argue that most American Jews are afraid to stand up against anti-Semitism. They're afraid to stand up against Mamdani, who is an anti-Semite. If you deny the legitimacy of the state of Israel, which is so critical to our being as Jews, it's central to our being, that's anti-Semitic. But we're afraid to stand up because we're afraid that it'll attract too much attention and it places us in jeopardy. And that was the Dam Tzfardea when we listed those plagues and said, we're coming after you. Blood and frogs and all of that. But Rabbi Yehuda understands it very differently. I'm going to try to argue. He tries to say, and of course here I'm reading into this the way the Israeli army drops leaflets and is only going to go after those who are responsible for the murder. They're going to do everything that they can to save civilian life. When you look at the movement of the plagues, there's blood, then there's frogs, and then there's lice. Now, when you think about it, the blood didn't really affect the body of the Egyptians. It affected the rivers. Then the Makot came a little closer. There were frogs in one's home. Not nice. Not pleasant, right? Not pleasant at all. But it still didn't affect the bodies. Then lice. Lice, that affects the body. And there are commentaries who say, listen to this, that if you look in the Torah, get the chills when I think of this, before the plague of blood, Moses and Aaron offers a warning to Pharaoh, blood's going to come. Before the plague of frogs, another warning. Before lice, no warning. And the commentators see this as the blood and the frogs were really the warning for the lice. They actually see within the first 3 plagues, Shuli, only 1 plague. Whereas the way we just discussed the 10 plagues, we discussed it like a maximum power, right? Blood, frogs. Rav Yehuda is trying to lessen the blow. We're going to warn with blood and with frogs. We're warning you, don't hide in hospitals. We're warning you, don't do that. Our grandson, Eitan Fishberger, God bless him, my 766421, he's always called into these war zones because he's a genius. He's the one who has fishy files. He has 70,000 followers. He's the one who has discovered heads of medicine in Gaza hospitals who are terrorists, who really are with Hamas. So the warnings are all over the place. And only when we have to, it's like a laser beam. And look, it's like a laser beam, the lice. Look at the next triplet. What's the next triplet? Orov. What is Orov? Wild animals. They're in the field. And then Dever. Dever is the pestilence. It comes a little closer, but it's still not on the body. Shchin is on the body. It's interesting. You would think that after the first 3, the next plague would even be more intense. No, it moves close and then it withdraws. It goes backwards. Then it comes more intense, and then the 6th plague is on the body. Fascinating. And the commentary is saying the same thing, that just as the 1st and 2nd were warnings for the 3rd, so too the 4th and the 5th is the warning for the 6th. And so too for the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Barad, hail. Where is hail? Outside. Arbe. What is arbe? That's locust. It's closest. Choshech, it was so dark. The Bible says it affected the bodies of the Egyptians. They couldn't walk. It's a lessening of the power of the Makot. That's what he's doing here. Titzach Adash Be'achav. And when we say that, we again spill blood. And it's here that I believe that the common way of looking at the spilling of blood makes the most sense. We're saying, do you know why the makot was minimized, if you will, why we tried to lessen the power of response? Because we don't want to see even the death of the enemy. According to this interpretation, of the first 9 plagues, there were only 3. There were only 3. Why? Tzach, Adash, Bachav. I think I write this. I write on page 82, if you could read, Shuli, perhaps concerned.
I just need a second to share it. Sorry. I see. There we go.
Okay. Perhaps concerned with the brutality of the plagues, Rabbi Yehuda seems to offer a softer approach, understanding them in 3 triplets, culminating with the slaying of the firstborn. Note that every triplet moves from the outer places in Egypt to inner places, the river turning into blood, to the frogs that swarmed into Egyptian homes, to locusts which attacked the very bodies of the Egyptians. One would have expected that the 4th plague somehow would be more severe, and yet it is not. Arov, the mixture of animals, primarily manifests itself in the fields. Pestilence comes from indoors. Boils affects Egyptian bodies. The pattern is repeated in the last triplet, from the outer hail to the inner locust to darkness, so dark the Egyptians were immobilized, unable to move. In fact, some claim there were only 3 main plagues, the 3rd, 6th, and 9th, those that attack the Egyptians directly. Indeed, the Torah has Moses issuing a warning in the first 2 of each triplet, with the 3rd happening without warning, the warning being implicit in the first 2. Only when refusing to change their ways does the slaying of the firstborn occur. This was a focused response, what is called in modern times a targeted killing, as the firstborn were the Egyptian priests, the wicked visionaries responsible for advising Pharaoh and planning the brutal enslavement of the Jews. Hence, they alone are attacked.
Right, and that then includes the ritual of the wine being spilled. Why was it so precise? Because we don't want to kill unnecessarily. You know, I just, the mayor, it breaks my heart to see this. Okay. He invites this Chalilia to Gracie Mansion. He keeps saying that Israel's responsible for genocide. He keeps using that word. Think about it. Think about what's happening right now. When the Iranians are firing missiles, I mean, in this country, you're not only severely punished when you murder, but if you attempt to murder someone, you could be put away for life and more. What are they doing when they're firing these missiles? They're attempting to murder, and the more civilians they murder, the more it is. Who's attempting genocide? And when we drop bombs, I mean, Israel has complete control of the skies, as with the Americans. Israel could easily knock out all of those Tehran high-rises. Doesn't do that. That's not who we are. That's not what we're about. And so that's the 3 ways I'm looking at the ritual. We lump the ritual together. That's the way we normatively do it. We're suggesting that the rituals have 3 different meanings. In the first interpretation of Moftim, it's the blood of Holocaust victims and Israelis, victims of terror in America all over America, including Pittsburgh and San Diego and Washington and now Amsterdam, all over the place. The second interpretation of Moftim, list of plagues. It's harsh. They've lost their right to live. And the third, there is a Toah HaNeshek, there's a purity of arms on the part of the IDF. You can see that this is just a small section of the Haggadah. That's why it took a long time to write this Haggadah. Just that piece took probably many weeks with Shuli's help to write. It's not easy to write. But I don't want to end with this. I do want to end with something that is a bit more uplifting, and that is that at my parents' Seder, they always ended the Haggadah with, we would stand up at 2 a.m. and we would sing Hatikva, always. And the Hatikva is just so beautiful. In the Hatikva we say the words, first of all, it's quite something. I think we're the only national anthem whose name is Hatikva, hope. And every national anthem, I heard this from Ari Hart, Rabbi Ari Hart, how I miss him. National anthems are in major keys, joyous, marching. Only the Israeli national anthem, it's in a minor key. It's a sadder key. I remember I was once doing a kumsitz here, right here. And so with my guitar, my limited ability to play, but you got to do the best you can with what you have, which is an important lesson in life. And David Bar-Ilan's son, I'm blocking his first name.
Jeremy?
Jeremy. He was a brilliant guitarist. So he looked at me and he said, Rabbi, do you mind if I play a song? I said, not at all. Takes the guitar and I can't spielen, he can play. And he looks at me and he says, Rabbi, is it against Jewish law to sing a Jewish song in a major key? That's what he said to me. I was all in a minor key. The Tikva's in a minor key. It's crazy when you think about it. And what do we say in the Hatikva? Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not lost. You know where that comes from? It comes from the book of Ezekiel, the dry bones. When Ezekiel is standing over the dry bones and he says, Avda tikvatenu, our hope is lost. And what is our response? Oh, lo avda tikvatenu. Sorry, Ezekiel. In fact, I'd like to think when Ezekiel says our hope is lost, he's challenging us to respond and say, Od lo avda tikvatenu. And then we say, Ayin L'Tzion Sophia, the eye is towards Zion from a distance. Sometimes the way to appreciate what we have is we have to step back, see things from a distance. The prophet Jeremiah says, Merachok nireli. God says, from a distance I see you. Avat olam avtich, I love you eternally. Sometimes if we look too closely at the people we love the most, we may not like what we see. Too many wrinkles, too many, to use my teenage words, too many pimples, too many creases, too many of all of that. Too much. Sometimes you got to go back. Look at things from a distance. Merachok nireli. What's the leadership lesson that I've often mentioned? It's called go to the balcony. You're on the dance floor. Somebody says, what's doing on the dance floor? You say, oh, it's very crowded and people are stepping on each other's toes. Now go to the balcony and you're looking at the same scene and someone says, well, what do you see? Oh, what do I see? The floor's not that crowded and people are really quite graceful. Merachok nireli, avat olam avtich. And so I want to offer a blessing that as we sing Hatikvah, these 2 years of darkness and now this war, that we recognize that in the darkness, these have been remarkable years. Israel's a remarkable country. Remarkable country. I sit on top of our daughter's Mirpeset in Efrat, and I look out. When I look out the balcony of my apartment building, I always say to Toby when we're in Israel and we're looking out, I say, Toby, it beats Henry Hudson Parkway. And I'm looking out and I'm saying to myself, I spent a lifetime with holy, holy people together, building a little community. Excuse my French. I look out on Israel and I say, built a whole goddamn state. A whole state. I'm talking big time. You gotta step back. We're no longer a banana republic of 600,000 Jews, 3% of the Jewish community of the world. We're 7.7 million Jews. That's more than half of the population of Jews in the world. There are 10 million people living in Israel, giving rights to those who are not Jewish. Where you have Jewish rights anywhere in Arab countries? Where? It's remarkable. The Hebrew language. I bet you in the year 1900 you could put all the people who spoke Hebrew in one apartment building in New York. Now, wherever you go, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, Florida, Los Angeles, Brooklyn. You saw how many Israelis came out to watch Denny Avdia? So did I come out. I came out. I wanted to see my boy Denny. He's an Israeli who's an all-star in the NBA. This is the renewal of a language. This is a miracle. We're going to celebrate the Exodus from Egypt. We've experienced in our lifetime a larger Exodus. The Exodus of Soviet Jewry. 2 million Jews. As one who with others was involved in this struggle, you were all involved, everybody on Zoom. I mean, in the 70s, did we ever imagine that 2 million Jews would leave and play a role in bringing the Iron Curtain down? That's like Torah? To those who think that Israel's not a Torah state and all of that? And then I oppose, as you know, the rabbinate and any coercion. But I'm very proud that there's more Torah being studied in Israel today than has been studied at any time in any place in Jewish history. This is a remarkable time. And that's why this Haggadah, Dear Tova, is called Yehi Or. Its final review was written right then on October 7th. And it was on that day in Israel, here there's Shmini Atzeret and then Simchat Torah. In Israel, it's the same day. So on that day, we also finished the Torah and we started the Torah. And the Torah says, V'choshech al pnei tahom. There was darkness. Vayome Elokim Yehi Or. And God said, let there be light. And the light pushed away the darkness. So as we sit down at the Seder, and we're thinking, oy, 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 dayenu, enough of this. Enough of the brutality, enough of the killings. We should understand that dayenu has an opposite message. God, if you only did this little good thing for us, enough. So grateful. So grateful to you. It's all a matter of attitude. What's the attitude? If you've got an optimistic attitude, it goes a long way. What did Shimon Peres say? When he was 90, he was always optimistic. I was not always his best fan. Many protest against Peres, but he was a historical figure. They said to him, how are you always up? He says, listen, optimists and pessimists die the same way. they just live differently. I decide to live as an optimist. This is a time for us to be optimistic, full of hope. How could one be full of hope? It's to talk hope, to sing hope, Od lo avda tikvatenu, to act with hope. That's the key, Od lo avda tikvatenu, Yehi or. That's the prayer, Yehi or, Yehi or, Yehi or. And let there be light for our families. But for Am Yisrael, Layehudim, Haita, Ora v'simcha v'sason v'ikar, and light for the world. We're to be an or lagoyim, a light to the nations of the world, Yehi or. We'll stop here and open it up and ask